One of the most iconic Lunar New Year dishes for Cantonese people is turnip cake and taro cake. So I'm gonna show you guys how to make this type of cake. Let's get to it. I forgot to take a picture of all the ingredients in one photo, so I'm gonna just list it out here. You'll obviously need your fruit vegetable of choice, so that's either taro or turnip or radish or daikon or whatever the name is. This video will be daikon, but the method is exactly the same. Instead of thickly julienned daikon, you'll be using cubed taro. The only other crucial ingredient is normal rice flour. Remember, normal rice flour, not glutinous rice flour. We're not making mochi. Well, I mean, Cantonese people also make steamed mochi cake or New Year's cake as well for New Year's, but not in this video. Anyways, next, you need all the iconic Chinese umami ingredients you can find. So that's things like shiitake mushrooms, dried scallop, dried shrimp, Chinese preserved meats. Normally I see preserved pork belly, but I've also occasionally seen lapchang, and my family will also put in ground pork. But those are up to you. You can honestly put whatever you want. I don't think it really matters. My family will also put in crushed peanuts, but as with everything else other than the root vegetable and the normal rice flour, this is optional. Now that that's finally out of the way, let's get to cooking. Sorry, one last thing I forgot to record. You want to rehydrate your dried shrimp and your dried scallop a few hours before cooking. This is just a picture I found off of Google. I think that's the last thing I forgot. I hope. So the overall recipe is actually pretty simple. It's just a lot of prep work. If you're making daikon cake or radish cake or turnip cake or whatever it's called, I think it's usually called turnip cake, but then it's called daikon. I don't know. You want to cut your daikon into strips so that it's about maybe like a 1/4 of an inch in width and then maybe like 2 to 3 inches in length. If you're making taro cake on the other hand, you will usually see it cut into cubes, maybe 1/4 to 1/2 inch in length. The other day I recorded myself cutting the taro. On the left is the video of me cutting the turnip, and on the right is the recording of me prepping the taro. Again, the prep work is a lot of work, but overall it's a really simple recipe to learn, and it's super easy. Just think of it as a workout before you get to indulge in deliciousness. A lot of people have going to the gym as their New Year's resolution. This is your first step. The preserved pork I actually prepped the day I made the taro cake as well. So with that, you just have to cut off the skin, because the skin's really tough and you don't want to just chew. It's really tough when you prepare it this way, and so if you bite into that, like the texture's all off and you're just sad while you're eating your taro or turnip cake. After you cut off the tough skin and any excess fat that you don't want, just thinly slice the pork. Back to the present, or I guess this is still the past, but like the closer to the present past. You know what I mean. You want to thinly slice your mushrooms, like super thin, like as thin as you can get. And if it's too long, like maybe more than 2-3 inches, just cut that in half. It really doesn't matter, but that's just what my family does. Regardless of what you do, it's time to cook. So here are my prepped ingredients. Just the dried scallop and the dried shrimp. Do not throw away this liquid. This liquid is pure umami, so save that for later. Pour in a bit of oil into your wok and then wait for it to start smoking. Don't smoke, smoking's bad for you. But once the pot is hot enough, throw in your preserved meats and then stir it around to render out some of the fat and until fragrant. Once that's done, you can throw in all your umami ingredients. So dried shrimp, dried scallop, mushrooms, and also ground pork. If you're gonna put it in there, I forgot and I put it in later, but yeah, put in your ground pork now. I'm an idiot. Once fragrant, you can toss in your turnip or your root vegetable and start stir frying and tossing that around a bit. Now is when you can also add in your spices. So usually people put in white pepper and salt. You can also put in MSG if you want. You can't really salt or pepper to taste because you can't really taste it. So I would err on the side of being more bland because you can always dip it in hoisin sauce or in hot sauce, but you can't really make it less salty, you know? Toss that around a bit and then you can add in your toasted peanuts. I toast it first and then put it in later because oftentimes if I put it too early with the other meats and stuff, sometimes it burns and it becomes really bitter, and that's not good. So it's a little bit more work, but then this prevents it from burning. Once you've cooked it down a bit and the turnips are all wilted and stuff, you can toss in that remaining umami liquid from the dried scallop / dried shrimp. Toss it around a little bit more and then pour in enough water to barely cover all the stuff inside the wok. Cover your lid and let it simmer for a bit. Don't forget to check periodically just because you're super impatient and you really want to eat turnip cake. After it's cooked down a bit, pour in more water, enough to like drown all the ingredients. It really doesn't matter too much because you're gonna cook it down anyways, but afterwards pour in your rice flour. Again, this also doesn't really matter, just pour in enough so that you have a good ratio. I'd say maybe like per turnip or like per turnip and a half. Use 1 bag of rice flour. Keep in mind that the more rice flour you use, the more salt and pepper you should use. So if you're using more rice flour, then add more salt and more pepper. If you're using less, then add less. Keep cooking until it's like 1 or 2 steps away from being like a paste. Like a very thick, like cheese, like nacho cheese. There we go, that's a good comparison. It's like melty cheese. That's about the consistency that you want. Here we forgot to add the ground pork as I mentioned earlier. Whoops. what you gonna do? It won't taste as good because you don't get that mirrored reaction, but whatever. It was still super yummy, even though we messed up like a bajillion times. But the ground pork is a perfect example of how forgiving this recipe is. Even though we super messed up, because we had to cook for longer to cook the ground pork, we had to add a little bit more water so we wouldn't burn the turnip cake. And then we just cooked off the excess water and that's it. It's like no difference. So if you're as forgetful and as hashtag not a chef as I am, this is a perfect recipe for you. Anyways, so scoop that up into a container and then flatten it out. Don't press too hard, so kind of just like scrape it until it's semi-flat, and then dump it on the table a few times just to release any air bubbles, and then throw that into a steamer and steam for about like 35 to 45 minutes. When you have around 1 to 2 minutes left, take it out and then immediately sprinkle on some peanuts, sesame seeds, and green onion. Technically don't need any of those things, but it's just what my family does. This is usually a 2-person house in our job just because you don't want it to get cold while you're garnishing the top. After you're done garnishing, just throw it back into the steamer to steam for about a minute or two. You want to make sure that you don't steam for too long or too little. If you steam for too little, the garnish doesn't stick onto the cake, but if you steam it for too long, then the green onion starts to wilt and just looks ugly and like kind of yellowish, brownish, and you're done. Take it out and put it somewhere to cool and set. You can't eat it right away, you have to wait like a few hours. We usually wait overnight, but a few hours should be fine. And that's it. That's Cantonese lobako or radish cake. It's a little bit more work, but pretty easy. Oh, ignore that. That's just my overnight oatmeal. But yeah, that's it. Hope you enjoy. Gong hei fa cai, and happy Lunar New Year. Now's when you give me a red envelope. What's up? So it's the morning after. This is the turnip cake, and it's so good. You can eat it like as soon as it cools off. So you can maybe after like 2 or 3 hours, you can already eat it. But if you let it set a little bit longer and then you pan fry it, right? And that's when like it's like the rice starch is caramelized and it's crispy and it's so delicious. Here's a piece. Pan fried turnip cake. And you can do this with taro cake as well. That is so good. It's crispy. It's fragrant from all the preserved meats. It's so good. Yeah, that's how you make it. So this is the pan-fried version where you just cut into cubes or like blocks, I guess, and then pan-fry it. You can also just eat it like plain steamed, right? This also is good as well, but just not as fragrant, not as delicious as the pan-fried one. So I definitely recommend trying both. But yeah, that's it. At dim sum, you'll usually have it pan-fried, but you can eat both styles, right? So that's it. Super easy. It takes a little bit of time, takes a lot of prep work, but it's actually not that hard. Yeah, turnip cake. Have a good day.